really seeing patients yet. But I guess I can make an exception.
Murderous mind of Dr. Giggles explored. An underrated gem. Are you scared to visit a doctor? Well, after watching the 1992 horror slasher Dr. Giggles, you have all the more reasons to be scared. Directed and co-written by Manny Coto, the film centers on a psychological patient named Dr. Rendell, who considers himself a surgeon, comes to his hometown Moorehigh to avenge his father's death when he begins a murder spree in a surgical theme. He soon became obsessed with a teenage girl named Jennifer, who had the same heart ailment as his mother, and decided to treat her with a heart transplant. The film starred Larry Drake as Dr. Giggles, Holly Marie Combs as Jennifer, and Glenn Quinn as Max. Let us now first understand the backstory before digging into the plot.
Before we go into our list, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click from you, but it means a lot to us. Thank you. Let's begin.
Dr. Giggles, released in 1992, explained. In the year 1957, Dr. Rendell, residing in a quiet town Moorehigh, lived happily with his wife and son. He was pretty thrilled to see his son Evan Jr. impersonate him by operating on his soft toys. But their happiness came to a halt when Rendell's wife died due to a severe heart ailment. Eventually, Dr. Rendell's patients started disappearing. After investigating the matter, the citizens of Moorehigh discovered that Dr. Rendell and his son were ripping out his patient's heart to bring back the doctor's dead wife with a heart transplant. Consequently, the citizens stoned Dr. Rendell, but there was no trace of Evan Jr. The citizens of Moorehigh remembered the Rendells through a legendary poem explaining the horrifying incidents that had occurred in the past. The film commenced after 35 years, with adult Evan Jr. killing the doctors of a mental asylum, mimicking an open heart surgery, while the remaining mental patients watch the murder as an amusement. He also slaughtered another doctor and a nurse before escaping from the asylum and headed towards his hometown of Moorehigh to avenge his father's death. Evan Jr. was nicknamed Dr. Giggles due to his tendency of giggling now and then. In Moorehigh, Jennifer Campbell, her boyfriend Max Anderson, and her classmates planned for the upcoming spring break. Jennifer had recently lost her mother and was upset about her father being in a relationship with another woman. Moreover, she had been diagnosed with a heart ailment and had to wear a heart monitor throughout the week to determine whether she needed surgery. Meanwhile, Dr. Giggles reached his abandoned house in Moorehigh and dressed up entirely like his deceased father while grabbing his father's medical bag, which contained many surgical instruments. The next day, Jennifer's friends arrived at the abandoned Rendell house to explore the place and search for bodies hidden in the wall, according to the legendary stories about Rendells that float across the town. Two of the friends were locked in a room by the others as a prank and eventually became victims.
Yo, how long are we gonna keep banging on the walls before we give up this shit?
Of brutal murders by Dr. Giggles. Soon, Dr. Giggles killed another neighbor by inserting a tongue depressor through her nostrils, followed by two other friends of Jennifer. In the meantime, Jennifer, tired of carrying the heart monitor causing hindrance in her enjoyment, decided to dump it in the fish tank and headed for the carnival to meet Max. When Jennifer's father found her heart monitor in the fish tank, he became anxious about his daughter. He rushed after Jennifer, leaving his girlfriend behind, who was also brutally slaughtered by Dr. Giggles. Consequently, Dr. Giggles found Jennifer's heart monitor on the floor and immediately became obsessed with her, realizing that she had the same ailment as his mother. Jennifer returned to the carnival only to find Max kissing another girl. Distressed, she ran into a house of mirrors, followed by Max and the other girl he was kissing, where she encountered Dr. Giggles with a syringe and ran in despair, stumbling down several times. Finally, she bumped into the police car, but at the police station nobody believed her apart from the two rescuing officers, Ritz and Magruder. Magruder was an elder policeman who was aware of the history of the Rendells. He narrated his terrible experience on the night after Dr. Evan Rendell was killed. That night, he saw the 7-year-old Evan Jr. cut open his mother's dead body and came out giggling. His father had actually hidden himself inside his mother's dead body to save his life from the angry mob. Jennifer's father was the killer's next target. But the murder was interrupted by Officer Magruder, who had come for investigation. Magruder found Jennifer's father lying in a pool of blood, but Dr. Giggles inflicted a fatal wound on him before he could become alert. Officer Magruder managed to shoot Dr. Giggles, wounding him seriously before succumbing to his injury. While Dr. Giggles performed surgery on himself to remove the bullet, Max and Officer Ritz investigated and dug up all the information about Evan Jr. from the hospital's records. As her doctor was examining Jennifer, suddenly Giggles appeared, killed the doctor, and rendered Jennifer unconscious with a high dose of sedative. When she gained consciousness, she found herself in an operating room beneath Rendell's house, as Giggles planned to replace her ailing heart with her friend's heart, which he had ripped out. Just as Jennifer fainted, Max and Ritz burst in, and in the struggle, Ritz was killed when a fire started out, which led to the explosion of oxygen tanks destroying the Rendell house, while Max and Jennifer just managed to escape. Eventually, Jennifer was admitted to hospital, where it was revealed that the recurring trauma had damaged one of her heart valves and she needed surgery to replace it. While she was being prepared for surgery, Giggles reappeared. He had survived the explosion and started killing everybody in the hospital till he reached Jennifer. Jennifer ran for her life and hid in a janitor's closet when she spilled a cleaning fluid on the floor and electrocuted the killer doctor with defibrillator paddles. Finally, she stabbed him with 2 of his own surgical instruments. In the pre-concluding scene, Dr. Giggles broke the 4th wall while he started at the camera and asked, "Is there a doctor in the house?" before he died. A recovering Jennifer was seen in the hospital, visited by Max and her father, who had also recovered from his injuries. The movie was not successful, mainly because of its timing. It was a movie made in 80s style but was released in the 90s, which cared about serious slashes, intelligent dialogues, and polished picturization. Larry Drake had been brilliant in his performance, taking primary responsibility on his shoulders, while the remaining cast can be considered fair but not brilliant. The critics have not been entirely positive about it, but the director won Special Jury Award at Avoria's Fantastic Film Festival in 1993. The horror fans loved the dark humour of the film in addition to its originality and fast-moving plot.
Daddy!
The psychology of Dr. Giggles behind the murder, explored. Dr. Giggles, the film's titular antagonist, was a psychopath killer who was obsessed with being a doctor just like his father. Let us now observe his life more closely. Their family seemed quite happy and contented at the beginning, with loving and caring parents and Evan Jr. dissecting his soft toys, imitating surgeries in an attempt to impersonate his father. When Dr. Rendell's wife died of heart disease, he became wildly insane, and he tried ripping out hearts from his patients for a heart transplant that would make his wife alive again. We get a hint of their insanity as the father and son giggled as they sat around Mrs. Rendell's dead body. The controversial act of his father to kill his patients might have been the trigger that converted his already troubled mind to the deranged monster he would become in the future. Evan Jr. was nicknamed Dr. Giggles due to his tendency to giggle on every occasion, whether he is murdering or whether he is injured and so on. He was even laughing when he cut open his mother's dead body and came out, as his father had hidden him in there to save him from the angry townsman. From the hospital records, we find him to be diagnosed with schizophrenia, that too chronic, undifferentiated type, while the history also revealed that he was considered extremely dangerous. The way he carried out his murders using different surgical instruments was terrifying and spine-chilling. In the beginning, his motive was avenging his father's death, but soon his attention turned to Jennifer, who had a similar heart problem to his mother. As soon as he related Jennifer's condition to his mother, he decided to complete his father's undone task of heart transplant surgery. He started his murder spree, just like his father, to search for a proper heart that would cure Jennifer entirely. It is unknown where Dr. Giggles got his medical skills, as he seemed to carry out surgery on himself perfectly while trying to take out the bullet that hit him. His character could have been analysed better if other incidents about his past life were brought into light. But with his death, all facts remained unknown. Serious serial killers make us horrified, but humorous serial killers leave us stunned and petrified.
Doctor in the house.
Dr. Giggles versus the dentist. Who is more dangerous? Maybe one psychopath serial killer doctor was not enough for the 1990s, so another medical model was introduced in a 1996 film titled The Dentist, written by Stuart Gordon and directed by Brian Usner. Hollywood veteran Corbin Bernsen starred as the dentist, Dr. Alan Feinstein. Which of the two doctors do you think will be more dangerous? Many people, in fact, avoid dentists or surgeons, dreading possible painful procedures, but both Dr. Rendell and Dr. Feinstein are examples of the worst fears of the patients who are only interested in assisting their patients in leaving the world entirely. The backstories of these two doctors are entirely different. Dr. Giggles, as we know, inherited his insanity from his father, who was killed by the angry townsmen of Moorehigh when they found out about his killing of patients ruthlessly in an attempt to resurrect his dead wife. Dr. Rendell hid his 7-year-old son inside the dead body of his wife to save him. He was eventually put up in a mental asylum, and after 35 years he escaped from the asylum to avenge his father's death. Meanwhile, the dentist, Dr. Feinstein, was a pretty average person until he discovered his wife Brooke cheating on him on his wedding anniversary. From that time, he started losing his sanity till he attained complete insanity. Though the audience in the beginning might bear some sympathy with Dr. Feinstein, the compassion was lost once he tried to assault a patient under anesthesia sexually. If we compare the acts of both doctors, Dr. Giggles can be considered more dangerous than Dr. Feinstein, with a little margin. Both doctors slaughter whoever they encounter, but Dr. Feinstein still showed the slightest hint of sanity. It might seem that there is a remote probability of Dr. Feinstein sparing someone, but Dr. Giggles is unlikely to spare anyone unless they have the same heart condition that killed his mother. Another fearful fact about Dr. Giggles is his relentless giggles and humorous dialogues that dominated his characteristics. The insanity of Dr. Feinstein can still be related to the betrayal of his wife. But imagine the height of menace in Dr. Giggles as he giggles and kills his patients brutally, followed by humorous dialogues like, "If you think that's bad, wait until you get my bill." Well, last but not least, The Dentist comes with a sequel. But Dr. Giggles has no franchise except for a comic adaptation of its cult horror.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are about to experience the cutting edge of medicine.
Will there be Dr. Giggles 2? It has been 29 years since Dr. Giggles was released, yet no one has heard of any film's sequel. According to the script co-writer Graham Whistler, his original screenplay was vastly altered before it was filmed. Graham also mentioned that the horror fans could get an idea of his initial story by watching the 2008 film Deadly End, directed by him. He also stated that no one thought of making any movie sequel as it suffered greatly at the box office. Another fact is that the slasher movie craze had nearly ended when this film was released, while 4 years later the movie Scream revitalized the concept of the new generation horror film. No wonder this film, with a small group of fans, is buried under the clutter of forgotten movies.
This is all the time we had for today's episode. We hope you guys liked it. It would be awesome if you guys can take some time to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to tell us which topic you want us to cover in the comment section. Have a fantastic day ahead and stay safe.
Maybe having second thoughts, but when you wake up, you'll have a change of heart.